My name is Elijah Vance. I'm 45 years old and I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, a city where the air is thick with history and the scent of decay. Here, the line between culture and the occult is thin as gauze. I never thought my professional life as an architectural historian would become a spiritual battlefield. I was sharp, cynical, and highly regarded. My work centered on the hidden spiritual architecture of the French Quarter, examining everything from voodoo symbolism to Masonic cryptograms. On the outside, I had everything: a spacious apartment on Esplanade Avenue, a reputation for intellectual rigor, and an impressive book deal. But inside, there was a quiet ache. I wasn't an atheist, but I wasn't close to God either. I had grown up in a Christian home, but as I got older, I traded faith for research. Prayer became a forgotten language. I filled the emptiness with intellectual pursuits and the cold comfort of cynicism. I loved the mystery of New Orleans, especially in October. I saw the spiritual realm, but only as a cultural artifact, a fascinating relic of human belief. I thought the line between history and horror was just good tourism. And yes, I loved Halloween. I really did. The parties, the dark history, the chance to intellectualize the macabre. I never stopped to ask myself what I was truly honoring, but something always whispered deep down that life was more than this, that I was more than a collector of dead knowledge. Sometimes I'd stare at the ancient ceilings and think, what happens when we die? Is anyone listening when I dismiss them? Am I just drifting towards some empty end? I never imagined the answer would come the way it did. The emptiness behind the mask. Halloween had become one of my favorite times of the year, not for true darkness, but because it felt like a scholarly escape, a chance to laugh at the shadows I studied. I'd decorate my balcony with elaborate, historically themed decor. We'd say things like, "It's just context," or "It's harmless fun." But now looking back, I know it was dead serious. That year, I dressed as a high society vampire, a costume I felt captured the spirit of the old city. We went to a grand costume ball in a crumbling Garden District mansion. The music was loud, the drinks were strong, and everyone laughed under orange and purple lights as if nothing could touch them. But I started to get a chill, not from the swampy October air. This was spiritual, like the feeling of walking into a room where a seance had just taken place. I dismissed it as fatigue. Later, a friend offered me a drink called the Veil Bender. I took a sip. Everything started to feel foggy, not drunk, but distant, like I was slipping between two realities. I felt uneasy. The costumes that once amused me now looked grotesque. People wearing skeletal faces and demonic horns suddenly seemed less like playful actors and more like authentic participants. The joy I once felt turned into something hollow, something twisted. It was as if I had stepped into a world where light didn't exist, and the partygoers were no longer pretending. They were dancing like they were possessed, laughing like monsters. The accident, the day of darkness. I left the party earlier than usual. A low, pulsing hum grew in my ears, a warning coming from inside. I felt dizzy. My breathing grew shallow. The rain-slicked pavement seemed to twist beneath my feet as I cut through a narrow alley near Bourbon Street. I was dragging a shadow behind me. I remember thinking, I just need to get to my car. And then, headlights, a scream, silence. It happened in an instant. One moment I was walking, the next I was floating above my body. I felt no pain, only a sudden, profound release. I saw my expensive velvet coat torn, my body crumpled on the wet pavement. People were shouting, calling 911, but I was calm, detached. The chaos below felt distant, like a dream. Then I looked up. I saw it. A veil, thin and shimmering, pulsating like a living heartbeat. I felt pulled toward it by a force beyond time. The moment I crossed that veil, the world behind me disappeared. I stepped into eternity. The silence that screamed time didn't exist anymore. No sound, no weight, no breath. I was aware, not with my body, but with the core of who I truly was. I saw the paramedics working on my body, their mouths moving fast, but I couldn't hear a thing. It hit me with terrifying clarity. I was dead. I turned my gaze upward, and the sky itself unfolded. Layers of light and color vibrated with an intelligence I couldn't comprehend. The fear was gone, replaced by pure, absolute peace. Then I heard it. A whisper so soft it could have been my own thought. You were never alone. I looked down one last time. My body lay broken. And then, as if a great wind passed through me, everything went still. The street, the sirens, the voices, gone. The world dissolved into light. Death isn't the end, it's the beginning of truth. It's hard to describe what it's like to be outside your body. I wasn't a ghost. I was terrifyingly aware. And the first thing I noticed was the silence that had a voice of its own. It pressed into me like a question. Do you see now? I looked around. The world I knew felt like a faded layer beneath something far more real. I was seeing with understanding. I felt a pull toward an infinite living presence, a realm of purity and light. But I also saw something else. Shadows. Spiritual darkness clinging to the earth. I saw souls entangled in it, unaware, laughing in ignorance. It was like watching children play with fire while the house burned behind them. And then I heard it, louder. They don't know what they're playing with, but they will. Those words pierced me as heavy, holy truth. I wept, not for myself, but for all of us who live in shadows while calling them light. The encounter with the light. The light arrived. It wasn't a sunrise. It was a door being opened to the one thing my soul had always longed for. It had substance, power, and personality. It knew me, every failure, every secret, every cynical word, and still, it loved me. I knew beyond a doubt this was Jesus. Not the historical figure I'd dismissed, but the living, everything. He didn't speak with a mouth, yet I heard him more clearly than any voice I've ever known. Elijah, he said, calling me by name. I have always been with you. Waves of violent, healing love crashed through me, shattering every lie I'd ever believed about my self-sufficiency. I saw my life, and I saw his pain because he loves us. And yet we choose darkness. The warning, they are playing with darkness. He said something next that shook my spirit. They are playing with darkness. They are celebrating what I came to overcome. My soul froze. He was talking about the cultural obsession with the macabre, not just the costumes, but the spirit behind it all. I suddenly saw flashes. Souls laughing while wearing demonic faces. Adults casting spells for fun. Parties where spirits were invited in. And behind it all, real evil, watching, smiling, feeding. This is not a game, Jesus said. They are inviting what they do not understand. They mock what is sacred and decorate their homes with fear. Even my children are celebrating the enemy's feast. I saw what he saw, spirits hovering over the French Quarter, children unknowingly dressed like demons, millions asleep, their souls lulled by entertainment. They are playing with darkness, he said again, and they don't even know they're being watched. I couldn't breathe from the gravity of the truth. Jesus turned to me and said, tell them I am coming back. And many are not ready. They must wake up. They must choose. The mission. You must go back. When he said the words, you must go back, something inside me broke. I didn't want to leave. Here, I was fully known, fully loved, and finally home. I begged, not with words, but with my whole being, please let me stay. But Jesus looked at me with a love that carried purpose. He reached toward me and I felt his touch, eternal, filling me with divine urgency. You have seen, he said. Now you are responsible. Your story will break chains, but it must be told. He showed me faces, souls searching in silence, young people drowning in spiritual confusion, people afraid to speak the truth. Warn them, Elijah, he said. They still have time. Then he stepped back. The light began to fade. I fell, spiritually, pulled through sound, through time, back toward a body I no longer wanted. The fight to be heard. I woke up in the hospital. Bright lights, tubes, pain. Doctors said I was a miracle. I tried to tell them. I tried to explain what I saw, what Jesus told me. But every time I opened my mouth, they nodded politely. Brain trauma, hallucination, a coping mechanism. Even my friends gave me the look. The one that says, we don't want to call you crazy, but they didn't want to hear about spiritual darkness. You almost died, Elijah. Be grateful to be alive. Don't overthink it. But how could I stay silent? I had stood before the king. I had heard his warning. I had been sent back with a mission. I started sharing quietly, online, in small gatherings. Some listened, many didn't. Some mocked. Some woke up. It's a lonely thing carrying a message the world doesn't want. But I carry it anyway because every time October approaches, every time I see adults celebrating demons and people calling it harmless fun, I remember what Jesus said. They are playing with darkness and they don't even know they're being watched. I didn't survive just to keep quiet. I came back for you. My life was never the same. And thank God it didn't go back to normal. I don't crave the shallow anymore. I don't chase what glitters and dies. because truth ruins you for anything less. Now I live with urgency, not fear. Urgency because I know how thin the veil really is. I know how many are asleep, blindfolded by entertainment, walking straight toward eternal separation while thinking they're safe. And I know how deeply Jesus loves them. He sent me back not because I'm special, but because you are. Because someone needed to tell you. You are being pursued. You are seen. You are wanted. And there's still time to turn around. What are you opening your heart to? Are you following the light or dressing up the dark? If Jesus stood before you today and said, "You must choose," what would you do? I made my choice. Now it's your turn. My name is Chloe Reynolds. I'm 33 years old, and I'm a staff journalist for a major online publication, specializing in debunking spiritual hoaxes and NDE, near-death experience phenomena. My world is built on evidence, logic, and the scientific method. I first heard of Elijah Vance, the cynical historian turned street prophet, 6 months after his accident in New Orleans. His testimony, the one about Jesus warning him, "They are playing with darkness," had gone viral in certain niche circles. It was exactly the kind of story my editor assigned me to dissect and categorize as post-trauma religiosity. I flew to New Orleans cynical, armed with scientific studies on brain anoxia and temporal lobe stimulation. I found Elijah not in a church, but speaking on a soapbox in a small, quiet park in the French Quarter, his eyes holding a depth that both disturbed and fascinated me. Chloe, V.O. I saw a man who had lost everything, his career, his credibility, his intellectual armor, but gained a relentless, terrifying conviction. He wasn't selling a self-help book. He was selling fire insurance. And I was there to prove the fire wasn't real. I introduced myself. He smiled, a kind, sad smile. He didn't try to convert me. He simply said, "You're asking the wrong questions, Chloe. You're asking if I saw it. You should be asking why I was sent back to tell you." For weeks, I followed him. I watched him speak about the hollowness of entertainment, about how a generation was being lulled by shadows while calling them light. He was direct, focusing heavily on the seemingly harmless cultural embrace of the occult, TikTok spells, and the celebratory nature of Halloween. Elijah, to crowd. I was an expert on darkness, and I was wrong. It's not a game. If you play with fire, you will burn. And the enemy loves a willing invitation. I kept writing my piece in my head. Trauma survivor creates cult-like following with apocalyptic visions. The connection, threads of truth. My assignment required me to track down others who had given similar testimonies. That's how I found the older case. A woman named Sarah Ellington, the nurse from Savannah, Georgia, whose story had predated Elijah's by a year. Her account was identical. The spiritual numbness, the Halloween accident, the encounter with the light, and the exact same core warning. They are playing with darkness. This stopped me cold. Sarah's story was tucked away in a small church blog. Elijah's was gaining viral traction. They had never met. Their backgrounds, pediatric nurse versus cynical historian, couldn't be more different. Yet the message was a perfect word-for-word match. I contacted Sarah. She was kind, quiet, and lived with that same unsettling urgency I saw in Elijah. Chloe, V.O. Sarah's simplicity was more chilling than Elijah's intensity. She wasn't zealous. She was merely reporting the weather from a dimension I refused to acknowledge. I asked her about the light. She just said, "He showed me two things, Chloe, his love and his sorrow. And his sorrow was because we keep opening the very doors he died to close." My scientific foundation began to crack. Coincidence? Mass delusion? Or a synchronized divine warning? I started to look at the world differently. I stopped seeing Halloween as a party and started seeing the shadows Elijah described. Not physical ghosts, but a spiritual oppression, heavy and real, clinging to the laughing crowds. The night of the festival, the veil thins. My turning point came during the city's massive annual Halloween parade. I was there for color commentary, but I was really watching Elijah. He stood on the sidelines, not preaching, but praying, weeping silently as the floats passed. The costumes were more grotesque than ever. Demons, skeletal figures, cultural appropriations of dark magic. The music was a primal, thumping bass. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like an invisible weight pressing down on my chest. I felt the hum Elijah had described. Chloe, V.O. I realized that my journalistic curiosity had been its own form of playing with darkness. I got close enough to document the phenomenon, but I didn't see the danger. Until that night. A float passed carrying giant stylized demonic figures. The crowd cheered, laughing. Then I saw it, what Elijah had called the veil. For a fraction of a second, the air above the parade shimmered. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a physical tear in reality, like heat rising from the asphalt on a summer day, but cold. Through the shimmer, I sensed a presence, malevolent, feeding on the joyous ignorance below. My professional composure shattered. I felt a sudden, profound fear, not of death, but of truth. The darkness Elijah warned about was not mythological. It was imminently real. I stumbled backward, hyperventilating. Elijah saw me. He didn't rush over or gloat. He just looked at me with eyes full of sorrow and conviction, the same look Sarah had described seeing in her NDE. Elijah, softly. Do you see it now, Chloe? They are not just wearing the masks. They are inviting the hosts, the choice and the mission. I didn't suffer an NDE. I didn't see the light, but I saw the shadow. And that was enough to ruin my scientific, cynical life. I fled New Orleans and sat in my apartment for a week, unable to write my debunking article. How can you debunk a truth that has torn your reality apart? I had to choose: publish the lie my editor demanded and save my career, or publish the terrifying truth and lose everything. I chose the truth. My article, The Unseen War, Why Two Strangers Share a Divine Warning, was spiked, and I was fired. My former colleagues called it a psychotic break. My friends distanced themselves. Chloe, VO. I became Elijah. I traded my reputation for responsibility. And I realized that the message wasn't just about Halloween. It was about accountability. It was about choosing light in a culture desperate to celebrate darkness. Now, I don't write articles. I tell the story. I travel, speaking alongside Elijah and sometimes Sarah. We are three disparate voices, tied by one terrifying, beautiful truth. We are the witnesses. People still ask me, "Are you crazy? Did you just finally succumb to the woo-woo?" I tell them, I didn't have to die to see the truth. I just had to be willing to look past the light of the screen and the glitter of the costume into the darkness we call entertainment. And I end with the same urgent question. Chloe, final lines. You've heard the warning now. It came from a nurse in Savannah, a historian in New Orleans, and a journalist who sought to silence them both. It is a universal message. You are loved, but you are also responsible. What doors are you opening in your home, in your mind, in your child's life? They are playing with darkness, and Jesus is coming back. Are you ready for the day when the music stops?